it's a kind of a one trick. It's not a one trick pony. It's not just good at something. It's good at a lot of things, and pretty much anything that you might choose to point that camera at is very likely to come out better than potentially other choices of camera that you may have invested in.
A camera of many talents. I like that. And what would you say are the top post-production trends at the moment?
It's an interesting one. Yeah, I mean, there's a really quite a big move back to nostalgic kind of film looks. So to the point where I've got good friends who are really carving out a career shooting with 8mm, 16mm film, and where they are shooting digital, they're doing a lot of work in post to recreate film grain and film look, and that's weird. I mean, for a lot of the people who I know who are doing that, they're much younger than I am, and I wonder if perhaps because I've been doing this a lot longer and I've come from that background, I started out in black and white photography and 35mm film. I think I love all of the aspects of clean digital imagery and then what that kind of allows me to do in post. But generally there's this kind of nostalgic feel. And you see it with the Sumires, for example, Canon's prime lens range that have been kind of decoated in a way and kind of taken back to a more sort of organic and slightly, introducing aberrations that I've spent years getting rid of. It's an interesting time really, because there's a lot of nostalgia. I think there's a lot of people looking backwards, which is impacting in all parts of the industry, but particularly post-production.
It's really interesting, isn't it, when things kind of come back full circle? You think you've left something in the past, and then it comes back and it becomes almost as important as the technology and the what's happening in the present time. I find that really interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when you're trying to marry that with a digital world and certainly recreating the amount of effort that goes into digitally recreating an old worn image. There's some fascinating techniques. There's a great series on Netflix called Sex Education, and particularly in the first series, if you watch it carefully, they've got these very subtle vignettes on a lot of the show, which is meant to be it's meant to feel like it's present, but it could be the 80s. It's got a weird kind of style to it, but there's this subtle vignette where they've split the RGB of the signal, and so they've done that all in post, and it creates this slightly odd vintage lens look where it's like an old kind of VHS where like it's gone out of phase and the red, green and blue channels aren't quite in a line, but you only see it as it kind of graduates on into the corners of the frame. That's the type of thing that 5 years ago no one in a million years would have said, let's deliberately make this big headline TV show look rubbish in the corners and look at the old camera. It's permeating all different parts of the industry at the moment.
I agree. I'm with you. It's weird, but equally fascinating at the same time. And the amount of work and time and energy that goes into creating something that looks so nostalgic is quite impressive. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to welcome Media to the conversation. Hello, my love. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm good. Having a great chat with Ollie. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
You're welcome.
So why is offering cameras with multiple recording formats so important to Canon?
I mean, it is important for us to have a camera that covers or suits different needs for filming needs, any single production. I think the worst thing for a DOP is if they feel restricted or limited by what a camera they're using can do. Having that different formats gives efficiency and flexibility. And for most DOPs, they want to be challenged so it can push their creativity as well. Our products do deliver that. We have C200, for example, C300 Mark III that we're talking about today. We have the C500 Mark II that we had a session on earlier. All of these cameras offer Cinema Raw Lite, so you get all the benefits of Cinema Raw, but in terms of flexibility in post, but you get a smaller file without compromising on the quality. We have XFAVC, we have proxy recording, so we want to give basically the OPs that flexibility to fulfill the needs of their filming and then their workflow as well, because they need to be prepared if they're shooting something. They need to be able to they need to ensure that they're not going to have a problem when it comes to post-production. That post-production is not going to be costing them a fortune. And I think at the moment, again, with the restricted or limited budgets for productions, if you have one camera that can actually do a lot more for you, then that's a winner. getting more but spending less. Pretty sure everyone wants that. And I think we are at a stage where, with the range of cameras that we have, different formats that each camera have. I mean, the C300 Mark III, for example, as I said, you have cinema raw light, you have XFAVC, the proxy recording, and even when it comes to XFAVC, you have the all-eye, and then you have long GOP. So if you want to record for longer, you want smaller files, then you do have that option.
Yeah. So ultimately, it's about equipping DOPs with just serious amounts of creative freedom. If they want to go down this path, they've got the kit to do that. This way, there's a bit of kit that will support that as well. Yeah.
You don't want them to feel limited by the camera they're using. And that's, as I said, the range we have, that's fulfill the needs of basically any filming needs, any requirements in pretty much every single production.
And how important is it then that Canon offers, compatible cameras that support, a different range of filming needs?
It obviously is.
Sorry. I'm talking about in a single production, basically. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, as I said, different cameras. Our cameras do work together. So you can use a C300, for example, even with the latest addition to the cinema camera. So the C70, for example, with the 300 will be a great match. I mean, both of them having the geo sensor. The great thing with the range of cameras that we have, whether it's the C300 Mark III, C500, the C70 that we announced yesterday, or even the R5, is you can actually shoot and then work with that footage and easily match the look of the video you're after. So that's one thing that you don't have to worry about. And that's one thing that our cameras can deliver. We have obviously C-Log 2, C-Log 3, color matrix. So you have different ways of actually shooting to make sure that you can easily, as I said, mix the footage and match the look you're after. Yeah.
So we've just talked about some of the amazing things that can be achieved with Canon cameras, but what are some of the challenges you're seeing DOPs facing when it comes to workflow?
I think probably, if I mean, I'm not a DOP, but if I put a DOP hat on, I probably will say storage and processing power, because at the moment, with the increased need for higher resolution, people wanting 4K or 6K or even 8K, I mean, those files are going to be massive. You need to be able to basically have enough storage and then having enough processing power to work with the footage that you just shot. The worst thing, or probably one of the worst nightmare for a DOP, is obviously if that doesn't get managed, it can slow down the production. And then it can cost you money because it can take longer in post-production as well. And I'm pretty sure if you're not budgeted, if you haven't budgeted for the post-production to take longer, obviously that can cause a problem. So storage, definitely. I mean, we have, again, going back to our range, the C70, for example, with 2 SD cards. I mean, SD cards have been around for years, as long as I can remember. Nowadays, you can get massive size, and they're actually a lot cheaper, so they're more accessible. And that's what DOPs are after. So they're after more accessible and a more affordable media. With the C300 Mark III, cinema raw light, you can record internally. You can do that into a CF Express card. You don't have to worry about with other cameras, if they're shooting RAW externally, you have to get additional equipment to do that. And then obviously that will have an impact on the workflow as well.
Yeah. Okay, Ollie, I've got a question for you. We touched on this earlier, but it'd be good to reiterate. How do you choose the right camera and format for the job? What's your thought process?
Yeah, it's quite straightforward, actually. It's first thing you need to think about is the output, the deliverable. So, where are you going and what are you trying to deliver at the end? And then you kind of work back from that. You have to weave in budget, obviously. You have to think, can I afford this workflow? I had a chat with a new client just yesterday. We had a meeting, and they are shooting a drone display at the end of this year. So it's you may have seen these companies, they now have lots of drones with lights on them, and they send out swarms of them, and they can make like 3D animations in the sky. So I was talking to a new client who do this, and they're doing stuff at the end of the year for kind of Christmas and New Year celebrations. Because of COVID, they want to reduce the the crowds. And the good thing about these types of drones is they can be seen from miles around, so you don't have to have everyone in a small space for fireworks. So they want to shoot this, and they want to package up a video for it, and I'm going to be doing all the grading for it. It's going to be nighttime. They want very high resolution because they're very small. So after talking about budgets, it was put forward by me that the C500 Mark II would be the perfect camera. It's very good in low light. It's one of the best low light cameras that are in Canon's range at the moment. It's obviously 5.9K RAW, so you've got very high quality codec and resolution, and it would fit perfectly with the 6K RAW that they were going to be getting from the drones that they're going to be using, which are another camera system. So that's a perfect example of what in that case it was noise. You wanted to avoid noise in the dark sky. I think if you're doing multi-camera shoots and you want color consistency from camera to camera, things like the C300 Mark III, the new C70, the R5, all of the kind of more recent camera releases from Canon, they all have the same neutral color matrix, which, assuming you white balance correctly on the cameras and you're in that color matrix, it's spooky how similar they are as you cut between them. Or you might have something where, you're doing like the tabletop stuff that I was doing for Wild Beer. If you wanted some, very sort of abstract, maybe for backgrounds, for motion graphics, you needed extremely high resolution, so you could punch in. You might choose something like the R5 with its 8K RAW. There's all kinds of different considerations, but you need to be kind of working back from that deliverable. What are you trying to achieve, and thinking about how it's going to impact your post-production pipeline as well.
Yeah. And is there anything related to lenses that is important for post-production?
Lenses obviously affect the character and the way it looks. Mostly it's about, from a post point of view and from a colouring point of view, it's about can you achieve the correct exposure. So, for example, this nighttime, drone display, we haven't actually started talking about lenses yet, but it will make far more sense for them to have fast, bright lenses that will reduce the need to go up to higher ISOs, for example. So that has a direct impact on me when I'll be grading that, because we need to be concerned about noise, and we need to be concerned about maintaining the exposure that they need to get. So lenses definitely do. From a character point of view, I mentioned the Sumeres earlier. They have a particular character and a look to them, which normally is decided upon based on how it serves the narrative and about the storytelling. But that also has an impact necessarily on the way that it's approached from colour as well.
Yeah, this drone project sounds amazing, by the way.
I'm not looking forward to all the rushes. There's going to be 8 cameras shooting 6K RAW. So, and they're going to be up in Edinburgh and I'm going to be down in Somerset. So there's logistics to work out, but it could be good.
But that is the beauty of what we've evolved to working virtually now. This stuff is important, and you've got the kit that enables you to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And let's talk. I've got a question for you. How do you run post-production from home? Got someone intrigued about that.
It's tricky. We have a studio here about sort of 10-15 minutes from where I live, and it's only a small space. In terms of, post-production covers various bases. Obviously, we're mainly set up for colour, which is one of the more difficult. Maybe audio would be the other one, but that's one of the more difficult kind of technically ones that you want to hit. It's about controlling light. We're fully blacked out here, and then introducing the right quality of light. Whether you're editing or color grading, you don't want colored, you don't want tungsten, you don't want kind of colored LEDs. I walked into a grading suite once, and they had like a bright blue light over here, and they were trying to create like this funky kind of space. It's like, this is not helping anyone. 6,500 Kelvin light sources to match the white point of the screens you're looking at. We're pretty compact. Everything is on this desk. Got a nice AV desk. Got the scopes. Got reference monitor. The price of these things is coming down all the time, so it's much easier to be able to build out a really high quality, reference quality post-production environment these days than it was even a few years ago. Prices are tumbling massively, so that's good. It means you don't have to drop 50 grand just to have an acceptable HD viewing environment. We haven't spent anything like that, and we've got we just did our first 8K from the R5, in fact, 8K HDR deliverable last week. So we can deliver 8K HDR from this suite, and certainly didn't spend anything like that kind of money.
Again, back to that, your career timeline. Again, it must be so fascinating to see how things, like you said, cost so much money, so many zeros to now come down. Even what Media was saying about SD cards, how they're so much more accessible now. Because back in the day, that was super expensive.
Yeah. It was always the case that unless you had $100,000 to spend on a setup, you just didn't do it. And so, rental facilities, you'd rent out spaces to do this stuff. The idea of doing it just in your own home environment or a small office, it's crazy, really. We've got a gigabit internet connection here, so we can send files anywhere very, very quickly. We literally don't even think about working remotely. We haven't done for years, but particularly now this year.
Yeah. You sound like the king of working virtually. I need quite notes from you. Media, for listeners, can you talk us through how the workflow of the C300 Mark III differs from the C7 that was launched yesterday? C70, sorry.
Okay, so I think probably the main difference looking at the two cameras is the fact that with the C300 Mark III, you have Cinema Raw Light. The C70 doesn't have that option. But then again, you're not going to need to shoot RAW in every single production. It depends on, as I said, as we mentioned before, it depends on the requirements for each filming needs and requirements. And with the C70, you do have XFAVC. With XFAVC, again, you have C-Log 2, you have C-Log 3, and you do actually get a lot when you're shooting with C-Log 2 or 3. To work with in post, so you are getting that flexibility. What I love about the C70 is actually the simultaneous recording. So you can actually record different formats. You can record different resolutions. So you can mix XFAVC, for example, MP4. You can do 4K and 2K. There is an option to record the proxy as well with the XFAVC files, different compressions as well. So you can, for example, record XFAVC all eye, so the better quality one for flexibility in post. But you also have the long GOP, so if you need basically a smaller file, you do have that flexibility as well. It is great. I mean, C300 gives you similar, not the exact kind of flexibility, but even with the C300, if you record in Cinema Raw Light, you do have the option to record a proxy. In XFAVC, the same thing. But as I said, the simultaneous recording option on a C70 is great. And I think anyone picking up that camera will probably opt for that because it does give you flexibility in post. You can basically record different resolutions, different compressions, and then think of what you might do with it later on. So you don't have to worry about it then and then.
Yeah, I like that. It's kind of, I guess it gives people behind the camera the confidence to achieve a bit more without having to waste time thinking about things that they can think about later.
Yeah, and even though it sits below the, excuse me, the C300, both cameras actually have the HDR recording. So with whether you're using a C300 Mark III or using a C70, you have HLG or PQ recorded, which is great. I think previously you wouldn't see that. In more of an entry-level camera. So now HDR is more accessible to DOPs with limited budget.
Yeah. So just going back to the C70 for a minute and the dual recording, is it possible to record HEVC 10-bit for 22 on one card and HEVC 10-bit for 20 on a second card simultaneously? And if yes, can you do both Canon log and HDR PQ?
You can, so you can set it up to do 422 10-bit, HEVC 422 10-bit, as well as HEVC, loads of numbers, 420 10-bit. So you can actually have it set like that. And then you can choose, because you don't have the standard law, you have C-Log 2, C-Log 3. And then with the HDR, you can choose PQ or you can choose HLG. So you do have that option as well.
Okay, and I've got a final question for you, Ollie. Just to sum up, what does a smooth workflow mean to you? I know you've talked, about what it means to you, but in a kind of end statement, what does a smooth workflow mean to you?
A smooth workflow means zero surprises, basically. It's difficult. I mean, production, post-production, things happen, things go wrong. I went into a shoot about 3 years ago. And I was actually on screen, so it was a training course I was doing, so there were DPs that were brought in to film it, and so that was not my remit on that particular case. And it was multicam, there were 4 cameras. I won't name names in terms of camera manufacturers, but suffice to say that even though these are all the same manufacturers' cameras, I was the one that was grading this kind of months down the road. I was the one that was doing the color grade, and matching those cameras was an absolute nightmare. And, you know, being sort of surprised and not expecting things in your workflows is where in pre-production you need to plan for it. And we talked about it before in terms of choosing cameras. It's, you know, when it goes wrong, it just, everything grinds to a halt. Everything just becomes compromised, and you really don't want that. Yeah.
Oh, another question for you has just popped in. Do reference monitors matter to you?
Yeah. Short answer. Yeah, absolutely. You can't trust your eyes. We get lulled into a false sense of security with our eyes. We think that they're just perfect. They're really not. There's all kinds of things that trick our eyes every day. And having a consistent light source, so not the sun, because that's not consistent at all. No. Having a consistent light source and a consistent calibrated reference monitor, they're pretty much the only ways of externally, and scopes, of externally verifying what's actually on screen, and not 100% relying on our eyes, which can be fooled quite simply.
Yeah, and have you used Canon's reference monitors?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, this time last year, I'm going to get the name wrong. The DPV 3220, I think, if memory serves.
The 3120.
Sorry, say that again, Media.
The 3120.
Maybe the 3120. Darn it, I got one character wrong, I'm sorry. I was on Canon stand at IBC last year in lovely Amsterdam. And that's their 2000 nit 31-inch reference monitor. Glorious thing, absolutely beautiful. And all of Canon's lineup of reference monitors are fantastic. Really, really fantastic. Just what you need. And the tools that are built in as well. People often forget it's not just about a good looking image, it's about what tools are built in with that monitor. And, you know, the false color, the HDR waveforms, you know, all of the tools that come with those, with the Canon lineup of monitors are really valuable.
Yeah. And I've just got to ask, how do you guys feel about not being at IBC this year? Are you missing the networking, the human interaction, you know, versus what we're doing now virtually online?
No, I do. I was saying before we went live, I'm really missing Amsterdam this year. This is the first time in years that I've not gone. It's great. I'm pleased about the impact on the environment. Think of our footprint for this year. It's so much smaller. That's good. That's a positive. But if I'm selfish, I'm missing being in lovely Amsterdam. I love Amsterdam. It's a lovely city.
Me too.
I'm missing it, to be honest.
And Media, you were meant to go to IBC for the first time.
Yeah, it was meant to be the first time for me supporting it. But I do actually miss events, because I usually have events pretty much on a weekly basis. So I do miss that face-to-face events, interacting with customers. But yeah, IBC would have been an amazing experience based on the number of years I was hearing people telling me all the amazing things about it.
Yeah, well, I think Canon's done a spectacular job of doing things virtually. I know it's not easy, but really, you know, you guys have really thought outside the box to bring such an interactive event. So kudos to Canon. And on that note, that brings us to the end of another Canon Vision Q&A. Thank you so much for submitting all your brilliant questions. I'd like to apologise for anyone who didn't get their question read out. You know, we've only got an hour. There's only so much we can say, so we didn't get a chance to have them all read out. I'd like to give a special thanks to Ollie. Ollie, thanks so much for that deep insight into your career timeline, everything that you do on the front line. It's been really quite fascinating hearing from you, and of course Media for taking the time to talk all things technical with us. It's been really brilliant hearing from you both, so thank you so much. And of course, thank you to you guys for tuning in and watching. I really hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and really feel like you've got something to take away with you this afternoon and think about. And on that note, all that's left to say is goodbye.
you.